There are so many characters right now that feel completely oppressive to play against in Overwatch 2. And if you keep losing against them over and over again, not only is it incredibly frustrating, it's preventing you from climbing. So we're going to give you general tips on how to counter each of the 3 roles and specific tips on how to counter the topmost 5 dominant characters in the game right now. But smash that subscribe for a free 5-man play of the game, and let's get right into it. Now, the first role we're going to talk about is the tanking role. And the biggest mistake that a lot of players are making is actually focusing the tank far too much. And I know, you might be saying, aren't we supposed to focus him more to kill him because the tanks are very beefy in this game? Well, you would think that. It is incredibly difficult for you to kill a tank at all, even with multiple points of focus fire, if that tank is being pocketed by multiple supports. Let's say you're a Soldier 76, for example. You could shoot at an Orisa all day, every day, and if they're being pocketed by 2 supports, good freaking luck. It doesn't matter if you hit every shot, you're not killing that Orisa. It would make far more sense for you to take an alternate angle, pressure these supports, get a pick on them, and then you could actually kill that Orisa afterwards, later down the line. Now, of course, there might be key moments where the tank is killable. If they're in a CC, they're anti, they're discorded, or they're weak, but you have to identify those specifically, and the vast majority of the time, if you're spending most of your time just shooting at a tank that is never dying, you're wasting your time. The next thing is how to counter the DPS role. And the biggest mistake that players are making against the DPS role is not watching what characters the DPS are picking on the enemy team and swapping up your playstyle based on what they are. As an example, if the enemy team swaps to Widow randomly, you need to be aware that they are already Widow and position in a way that doesn't give that Widow a free pick the second she appears in the battlefield. Another example of this is, let's say that you're a support and the enemy team's on Genji, but you haven't seen a Genji in quite some time. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the enemy Genji. What is he gonna do? What is he likely to do? He's not poking on the front line, so he's probably flanking. If you can anticipate a Genji's actions, it's gonna make you a lot better suited to deal with the Genji if he tries to make that flank. And many times, being in the enemy DPS's head, based on what type of strategy you would incorporate in their shoes, is gonna allow you to position in a way that is harder for them to get value, or just outright shut them down by killing them because you know exactly where they're gonna be, or you're ready and waiting for them to make a play. Now, the third role we got to talk about is the support. And one of the things that you have to be careful about supports is you cannot allow them to maintain optimal positions to have a dictation over the fight. Like, let's say there's an Ana on the high ground, and because she's up there uncontested, she's healing her main tank, getting crazy finishes on your team that are low, getting huge nades, and if she is not contested, she'll continue to carry team fights over and over again. But if you want to fight her, there's a couple of things that you have to be wary of, like her ability use. Knowing that after she uses her nade, let's say she uses her nade and she gets a multi-purple with that nade. That could be a weakness that now she no longer has that for self-sustain and she's vulnerable. Paying attention to enemy support's cooldowns and their positions and not allowing them to take an aggressive position that will give them more value can force them to play a much more passive role so they don't have as much influence over the average team fight, which is what you want. Now let's move on to the top 5 most dominant characters right now and specific strategies that you can incorporate in order to counteract them. The first character on our list is undoubtedly Zarya, the unkillable god, the character that feels ridiculously hard to deal with. How do you actually shut down a Zarya? The first thing that you gotta do is track those bubbles. Zarya has 2 bubbles, and typically right off the bat, a Zarya will waste a bubble. They'll use a bubble on herself to gain charge. Afterwards, I want you to watch the Zarya and take note when she no longer has a secondary bubble. If you can time your engagements around a Zarya not having a bubble and call that to your team, it's much easier to focus a Zarya down and kill her. But let's say you're a Genji and you're trying to go after the Zarya, or you're trying to go after an enemy support and the Zarya on the enemy team bails that person out with the bubble, your entire play could get shut down. You're gonna die. So it's really important that you're paying attention to when a Zarya has bubbles versus when she doesn't. In addition to that, you need to be tracking a Zarya's ultimate. If she's full charge and she's been doing a lot of damage on the front line, she's gonna be approaching that ultimate more and more. And I would also suggest playing Zarya a little bit in quick play so you can properly learn how these abilities and ultimates charge and generate over time. It'll make you a lot better at tracking these abilities and ultimates. Now, if a Zarya does have ultimate, you cannot play stacked together unless you have a defensive ult, and oftentimes you want that Zarya to be forced to grab in a way that doesn't get a ton of value, whether it's just a solo or duo grab. But the number one tip I have for you to actually freaking kill this character is don't let her bubbles become invulnerability. I do understand that you're not supposed to shoot bubbles because you don't want Zarya to get to high charge, right? You're not trying to feed Zarya charge. But there's a ton of situations where a Zarya is way out of position and she's only at half health. She's using her last bubble and she bubbles, and if you just break the bubble and focus her down, you're gonna kill her, but no one shoots her and they just let her walk away. Bubbles are not invulnerability. They can be broken and Zaryas can be killed, and it doesn't matter how much charge she has. If you break that bubble and kill her, she's back to freaking zero. The next character that we got to talk about is Genji, and a lot of people are complaining about Genji right now, but I promise you that you can shut down even the best of Genjis if you do these things. The first thing is note his freaking cooldowns, and you don't have to track them perfectly. Just note when he has dash and note when he has reflect. It's very important that you don't let Genji get a ton of free reflect value, whether that's reflecting a fire strike or a nade or anything like that. So if you're going to use these type of abilities on the enemy team at all, make sure that that Genji reflect is already used. Of course, there's a big sound cue, so you'll know when it's not off cooldown. On top of that, I want you to really note his awareness. Oftentimes, when the enemy is preoccupied with another threat, you have a key window to do a ton of damage to the Genji, even if he does have reflect, because he's going to take that damage, look at you, and then activate his reflect. But he wastes his reflect. You already did half the damage to him, and it's more likely to get him to either run away or kill him outright. Now, the next thing, and this is the most important thing that you need in order to actually beat a Genji consistently, is you cannot give in to the pressure that Genji outputs. Genji thrives on the pressure. While you're not going to be able to run away from this character, if you try, most of the time you're gonna die. And this happens very often with pretty much any character, whether it's Cassidy or Ana or Zen or whatever. An enemy Genji comes in with the Dragon Blade. If you try to run away from this character, you're probably going to die no matter what. The majority of the time, it's better to focus in and try to hit skill shots on the Genji. By giving in to the Genji's lethality, you don't give yourself any opportunity to win the fight outright. And that's why as Anas get better and more cool and collected, able to deal with the pressure, stare it in the face, and still do what they need to in order to shut down this Genji by hitting their skill shots, that is the way in which you're going to make a lot of Genjis respect you more and not get any free value. Because I tell you one thing, if I dive onto a support and they give up trying to fight me and instead just trying to run away from me, most of the time it's a very easy kill because I'm not afraid for my life. I can play out away from my team much longer because I'm not under threat of death, and then I will eventually get that kill. I will eventually get my dash back and get out for free. And if they would have just stood their ground and fought me and actually tried to hit some amount of shots on me, focus me down, it would have limited my impact and they could have shut me down entirely. The next character that we got to talk about is definitely Sojourn, who is being a ridiculous carry right now. And I want you to be very careful about playing against a Sojourn when they do have that right click charged up. You'll see it visually in their weapon, and to never give them easy shots when they do. This means don't jump against a Sojourn and incorporate proper left-right sway and crouch spam movement to make it harder for them to headshot you. Remember, the railgun is a hit scan weapon, so you need to treat it exactly how you would up against a Widow shot or an Ash shot, for instance. And don't give them easy one-taps, because if you go and look at a Sojourn montage or a 5K or whatever the case may be, you'll see a ton of players giving them the easiest shots possible, and they only have one chance to hit it. So they're going to take their time, wait for you to make a key mistake in your movement, and then punish you for it. Don't give it to them for free. Now, on top of that, remember that Sojourn only has one good form of mobility, so the second she uses it, she's pretty vulnerable, and she's easy to push down. Whether you're Genji or Tracer or Diva, you can just fly at her. So take note of those moments when she uses that mobility, and then look at that as an opportunity to punish her, especially Sojourns that are not disciplined with their movement use. On top of that, as a general rule of thumb, realize that the second a Sojourn pops her ultimate, you have a huge risk to reward factor there, where that is a time frame, a tiny window where you can go and make a play on her. She's still just as killable as before, and oftentimes she's popping it and she's waiting for the key moment where it charges up, and then she could start taking pot shots at your team. And it's an ultimate where you dive that character, you put a lot of pressure on her, you can kill her right then and there. And that's a really high reward for the risk, because she's going to be able to do a ton of damage and get a ton of value if you just let that ultimate go unchecked. Sure, she could potentially make an insane play on you and kill you, but it's not like she's super survivable in her ultimate. And unlike the majority of ultimates in the game, it's cast over a very long period of time. So if you nip it right in the bud, she's not going to get the full value out of it. The next character that we have for you is undoubtedly D.Va, who's being a freaking menace right now. Unkillable, gonna shut you down, fly at you, and kill you. She's basically Fat Genji. Now, it'd be a good idea for you to track her DM. While you're not going to be able to do this perfectly, you are going to be able to generally know that she has a lot or a little bit of DM. Like, if you just saw her use DM for like 2, almost 3 seconds, you could be like, yeah, she's low DM. That's a good call to make for your team, because it allows them to focus her a bit more and not worry as much about her potentially DMing their abilities. On top of that, the second she drops her DM, you have a key window of time to dump an ability into her before she can bring her DM back up. There is a delay, so she just drops DM, you can hit her with the nade, you can hit her with the sleep, you can hit her with the helix, and those are the windows where you can really nail her if that's what you're trying to do. I would say in general though, trying to focus this D.Va too much, especially when she has healers pocketing her, is not going to be the best use of your time, unless you're a character that can output a ton of consistent damage, like a really charged up Zarya, for instance. Otherwise, it might be better for you to focus her supports instead and try to get a pick off on them, because it's basically impossible to kill a D.Va if she has double support pocket. Now, just like with every other character, you should be tracking this D.Va's ultimate, specifically when you see a moment to try and kill this D.Va, right? You know that she's really far in your team, and you're like, all right, let's focus her down. And you think that we're going to finally demech this D.Va, but she pops her ultimate. So knowing that she has her ultimate can change how you're playing and who you're focusing. And in addition to that, if you know she has her ultimate, you could position yourself as a DPS to wait for her to actually kill her before she remechs. Whether you're a Genji, a soldier, a tracer, there's going to be a key opportunity where you can cancel her remech or kill her outright, which will be a really great way to just shut her down completely. And then the last thing, and this is a very important thing up against D.Va players, do not isolate yourself against her if you are within her flight distance. If you are not very far away from her and you're a character without any mobility or a way to get out, you will get just murdered by this character, and there's nothing you could do about it. She'll fly at you, and she'll kill you. I don't care if you're an Ana, I don't care if you're a Zen, I don't care if you're a freaking soldier, or a goddamn Widowmaker, or, you know, anything that can't really get away from this character. If you're too close to her, and she could fly right into you and micro-missiles you, you're gonna die, and there's nothing you could do. So be very careful of that. Be very wary of being in her effective flight range, and if you're gonna be somewhere and you're trying to put damage, make sure that you're there with a teammate, with a buddy, because if that D.Va flies into you, having 2-on-1, maybe you could fight that off, but being a solo person, that D.Va's just gonna eat you alive. Now, the last, but certainly not least character on this list that you're gonna want to shut down and counter is Sombra, who is so annoying to deal with right now. And while, yes, that hack is almost impossible to prevent, you will get your abilities back very quickly. So don't panic overly and just try to focus on your movement, making yourself hard to hit. Don't jump or give her any free shots. And then you're going to get your abilities back online. So if you're on it, you can nade yourself. If you're Tracer, you can recall. Whatever character you are, as long as you make sure that she doesn't kill you in that tiny window, you're going to be able to get your abilities back online, and you're going to be able to use that to reset. Now, in addition to that, realize that while you're hacked, you can still shoot her and force her away. You don't have to just straight up run away from her. In fact, you might be giving her a very easy kill if you run away in a straight line. And there's a lot of characters like Hanzo or Cassidy that can force her out just by hitting a simple shot on her when she comes in. And as long as you don't panic and don't freak out, very similar to the Genji example, you can put in enough pressure onto her to just force her away. And then the hack wears off and you're just fine. On top of that, I want you to note general translocator points and the general direction it's going in. You can see where it's going, and that will give you a better idea of maybe where she's set up, which could come up later on if you're trying to chase her down, or just knowing the general direction she's coming from can give you a better idea of who she's potentially going to hack. Like if your supports are positioned on the left side and that's where she's coming from, she's probably going to keep going for them over and over again. The next thing is, while it's very difficult to use your fire to prevent a hack because there's like no time, using LOS is still entirely possible. possible if you're positioned near doors and frames. Being able to easily jiggle past the door can completely prevent a hack from happening, and if that Sombra is just standing there trying to hack and the hack gets denied, she almost assuredly has to run away there. She cannot stay out there, so just positioning yourself much safer and not in the open where the hacks are free for her is going to make it much more difficult for her to get value out of it. And of course, even if she gets that hack off, if you're near natural cover, you can typically kite away using the cover for long enough for the hack to wear off and you to get your abilities back, and you're far less likely to die by her. Now, also, a really important point is, let's say you're gonna go in for a big ultimate. Let's say it's Nano Blade, for instance, or whatever ultimate. It could be pretty much anything. It's a good idea to force the Sombra to translocate first before you try to make these plays. The worst thing that you could do is try to fly in as a Nano Bladed Genji, only for the Sombra to just be playing near a team, hack you, and then you can't do anything. But if you wait for that key moment, you wait for her to come and try to hack, you force her out using your team and focus fire, and then at that moment, you're like, Sombra's gone, let's go. Let's dash up, let's go in for the Nano Blade. Now there's no Sombra to prevent you from doing this, and it's gonna be a lot easier for you to get this effective ultimate off. And then the last thing, of course, is tracking her ultimate. It's the same with every character. Keeping in mind how much ult an enemy has is going to change how you position. It's very, very important to do so. And while I know it's not going to be the easiest to just perfectly track her, what you can really do is just take note of how much damage she's been doing. If she's gotten pretty consistent value and you've had like either one very long fight or two quick short fights, she's probably going to have her ultimate. And it's a good idea for you to position in a way that spreads you out enough, but doesn't spread you out too much to where you can't help each other. I would say splitting off into like a 2 and 3 stack or a 2 and 2 and 1 stack. And then, of course, depending on the character you are, like if you're a DPS, for instance, and you position in a way where you're adjacent from your team, the bulk of your team, and the second the EMP comes out, you pop an ultimate. Like, let's say you're Soldier, the EMP comes out and you pop a Visor to put additional pressure on the enemy and prevent them from pushing in onto your hacked team. That could be a way to just shut down her ultimate outright. Now, I hope you learned something in this video about how to counter many of the top characters in this game. But if you have any questions, let me know down below, and let me know your #1 tip to counter X hero, any hero. You could put it in the comments. Smash the subscribe if you liked the video, and I'll see you next time.